Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on the 68th episode of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. This is our roundtable today. I've got Ben Toth in Paich, Hungary, Carlo Parcelli in Washington, D.C. I'm on the West Coast, and the indomitable Regis Tremblay from Crimea. I believe he's in Yalta at the moment. Documentarian. What else? I wanted to say author, but then I might have overstepped.
No,
the Reverend of many great
Reverend,
sermons.
that's right. So thank you guys for joining us. Our show today was entitled Derangement Syndrome. And then we put parentheses all of them because there's so many sorts of derangement syndrome. I take the approach on the Trump derangement syndrome that it's a very prolific and detrimental syndrome within the minds and the consciousness of a lot of Westerners. And, their faculties, their rational faculties kind of turn off when it comes to Trump. And, that can be that's a little bit of a controversial take. But there's more than just one kind of derangement syndrome. So not only do we have Trump derangement syndrome, but we have all sorts of derangements when it comes to the state of Israel, when it comes to Zionism, when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to Russia, when it comes to China. I mean, they just, proliferate some deranged thinking on all of these topics. So that's kind of what our title is referencing.
I know Billy Bob has been preoccupied with the Trump derangement syndrome, and right now I just have like four or five headlines. All I know is he wants a quick end to the war. Biden didn't get to meet with the Muslims. He didn't have like this, nice dinner at the end of, fasting. But I didn't really follow it. But for the last couple of months, Trump is going to be the end of democracy, the end of rule of law. Everybody's going to get gulagged or arrested and all that. Why don't you update? Because that's got the least of attention from me. Why don't you update us on how that one's going? Because I know it's everywhere. It's also in Europe, by the way, Trump derangement syndrome. He's going to be the end of everything.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, I think now more than ever, there is, discussion within the Western echo chamber that, Trump could be the next president. And they're kind of, you see preparations for accepting that fact. I would say in the past, they, nobody would suggest that was a possibility. But we see a lot of lawfare, right? So lawfare is like using the judicial system to go after people on a political basis. And that kind of seems like what they've been doing with Trump for a while now is the lawfare. And of course, it started even before he won the 2016 election with the Russiagate hoax. And then there was the Ukrainegate hoax. There was the fake impeachments based on those fabrications, et cetera, et cetera. But
last I heard, they were going after his money, right? In a judicial way.
Yeah.
How's that going?
I believe, and Carlo might even know better than me. I believe he ended up posting a bond of like $175 million, which was a lot less than they were originally claiming they were going to take from him. And I don't know how he found that money. I heard some billionaire in California agreed to post it for him, but I'm not even that certain.
Oh, I just want to say the guy that posted the bond was a repo man. He sells used cars or he sells cars to people, and then when they can't pay the note, he repossesses them. He's famous for that. So, Trump's kind of guy, basically.
Yeah.
A hustler.
Used car salesman kind of. No, I mean that.
I may be a little inaccurate on that, but that's basically what I've heard. So, I agree. To a certain degree, it certainly is curious that they're going after Trump the way they are going after him. But I think there are things you genuinely have to fear about Trump. Now, none of us on this panel have to fear those things because we're all white males. And of course,
in the US.
minorities have a tremendous amount to fear from them.
Yeah.
Latinos, people here without papers, African Americans, women, of course, because of Trump's connection to the evangelicals and his stance on abortion, that sort of thing. So, and fears of those sorts of things can make people deranged and feel the chaos. Trump's already got a track record. He's been here. He was president, I understand, if I'm not mistaken, for 4 years. And
that's how I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I remember it, 4 whole years. And his major accomplishments were giving an enormous tax break to the rich at the expense of everybody else, and just being one of the most obvious bigots since Andrew Jackson to hold the presidential title. I mean,
he also beat COVID. He beat COVID.
Yeah, he's not very loud about that nowadays. That issue.
So Carlo, no, those are all fair points. Lack of accomplishments, of course, and I definitely agree that there was an empowering of racist sentiment that was visceral for people of color during the Trump years. And I mean, I would argue that maybe that wasn't Trump that was responsible for that. Maybe it was the media hyping that and pushing that. But I definitely think that was true. I wanted to say, make one last rant, and then I wanted to turn it over. Poor Regis hasn't got a word in edgewise. But I wanted to say that what really frustrates me is when I see liberals watching the lawfare against Trump and coming to the conclusion that, man, Trump is being indicted. I mean, he's clearly unfit for office because of all these indictments. And, in my opinion, from my perspective, these indictments represent an indictment against our justice system, against our democracy. Not to say that Trump is the perfect Democratic candidate, but how can anybody see this patently politically motivated lawfare and then say that it's, it proves Trump is unfit? It kind of proves that our democracy doesn't exist and that our legal system is corrupt. That's all it proves.
Yeah,
but go ahead. That's all I want to say.
Let me just say a couple of things. First of all, to address the racist thing, there's tangible evidence. All the states are passing laws with Trump's agreement. That is, like, you can't, if somebody's, first of all, they closed down polling stations in minority areas so that people had to wait in long lines. Then they passed laws where you're not allowed to give them water while they stand online. You're not allowed to give them food while they stand online.
But that's not new, right, Carlo? That's nothing new.
Yes, it is. Well, it's not new, but it's new since Jim Crow. And
the Democrats do that all the time with Bernie Sanders in the primaries. They close all kinds of minority polling stations, so Bernie Sanders wouldn't win the primary.
But that was
nothing new.
That was the primaries, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I know. I've heard about that.
He's got racist policies. I think everybody gets.
He's got racist policies.
Okay.
The second thing, I forgot what the second thing was, but look, you got a guy who's never read the Bible, hawking the Bible, hawking gold tendencies. When have you ever had that in a presidential candidate? No, I can't. Not in my lifetime, and it's pretty long now. So
George W. Bush. He did some invoking of the scriptures.
Yeah,
well, scriptures, but
that makes me think of Bush.
Not with a Bible that he had some company print up for him that he wants $70 for, and it costs $3 to print.
I'm not here to defend Trump. Absolutely not. From the outside looking in, what's happening in the US looks like what the US is accusing Putin of. So another outside perspective is an American who has been living in Crimea for a long time. I wonder, what do you think about the clown show at home?
Well, I'm enjoying the conversation, guys. I have to make a couple of statements, full disclosure, before I continue.
Yes.
One, the last time I voted was for the first time Barack Obama was elected. I swallowed that hook, line, and sinker. It didn't take me long before I figured out what a charlatan that guy was. Second of all, anyway, so I haven't voted since then. I have a few comments to make. I am not involved and really not paying a lot of attention to what's going on in this election cycle. I know what's happening. I will state this right now unequivocally. I don't know how anybody can support Joseph Biden simply on his mental status, mental capability. I don't know how anybody can do that, given his advanced age. And what I have to say about that is I don't think he's going to be the candidate. I think when it comes to the Democratic National Convention, they're going to slip him out and slide somebody else in, like Garrett Newsom, the governor of California, who is got a lot of name recognition. They do not want Kamala Harris on that ticket. I am absolutely sure of that. So those are my comments. Now, Trump, this is my fear. I think Trump represents such a threat to these ruling powers that I would say are behind Obama, the Clintons, and Biden, are terrified of Trump. They're doing everything they can, as you've mentioned, politically, and using the judicial system as a weapon against him. I think that's a disgrace. I've never seen that ever before. And, you know, what I'm concerned about is that Trump may be assassinated.
Well,
I think he represents...
Not out of the realm of possibility.
I think he represents that much of a threat to these other powerful entities in the United States. And it's not just the Clintons, the Obamas, it's the financial institutions, it's the military-industrial complex. Now, I want to say this about Trump. I have said this now ever since he's appeared on the scene. Trump is not a politician. He's a businessman. And I think Trump is concerned about making money for himself and for the United States. Here's where I agree with Trump. He has blasted Obama for NAFTA, shipping all of those jobs across the border to Mexico. He blasted all the rest of them who have sent jobs to China and other places and left millions and millions of Americans without jobs. The entire Midwest is basically collapsed. For Trump to get up in front of the people of the United States and say, I want to bring back jobs to America, I can't tell you how appealing that is to people. Not to me. I don't live there anymore. But from a business perspective, even in terms of China, he recognized that this was not a fair trade relationship with China. Tariffs and very cheap labor, and accusing China, as people have just done today. I just read on RT today, they're accusing China of flooding the world with cheap goods.
Yeah, Janet Yellen and the EU, both of them are doing this.
Janet Yellen, exactly. And so for Trump to say those kind of things is going to agree with an awful lot of Americans, an awful lot. Now, I have 3 grown children, all in their 30s, mid to late 30s. They're all going to vote for Trump. 2 of them were in the military. One of them was in the military, he's since retired. The younger one's still in. They're absolutely convinced that Trump can save America. I wouldn't join that camp. Just hang on, Carl.
Yeah.
Let me finish what I'm going to say.
Okay.
Now, it's very obvious to me and to anybody who's objective that Clinton and Obama and that crowd came up with Russiagate. It's been completely debunked and proven to be false, all of it.
And they recently went on stage to save Biden, as in like a 3-man big fundraising event.
There you go. So when Trump was president, I'll never forget this. He went to Helsinki to meet with Putin. And if you can remember, it was a love fest. They conducted that press conference, which I think was a huge mistake in retrospect. They should have never done it. Both of them were speaking with glowing terms, but Trump especially, about how we're going to renew the relationship with Russia on many levels. It's going to start immediately. We're going to be on good terms with Russia. Trump never made it back to his plane before all of the media in the United States, Lindsey Graham, John McCain, and a host of others condemned him and were calling him Putin's poodle.
Yep.
You all remember that?
Yeah.
And then, very shortly after Trump returned to the United States, he shifted his position 180 degrees. 180 degrees. All of a sudden became anti-Putin, pro-Ukraine, anti-Russia, everything.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think happened?
The swamp, as he calls it.
Somebody got to him. There is no doubt in my mind that somebody got to him and let him clearly understand how the game is being played. The last thing I'm going to say is when Trump came into office, he said he's going to get rid of the swamp. He's going to drain the swamp. Oh my God, he kept all of them. If John Kennedy thought he was all alone in the Oval Office, except for him and his two brothers and a couple of advisors, Trump was all alone from day one all the way through his entire presidency.
Yep.
I'm not saying this to defend the man. I'm not going to vote in this election. I feel Americans don't have a choice between the lesser of two evils, however you want to describe it. They don't have much of a choice. All I'm trying to say is that this Trump derangement syndrome has been funded and been drummed up by the DNC, the Obama-Clinton cabal. And this is not a defense of Trump. It's just the way I look at how things have unfolded. Now, Trump, I believe, won that last election. I believe they stole it from him. He got 80-some million votes, whatever it was. And
YouTube, we don't believe that.
What's that?
I'm just talking to our YouTube censors. We don't believe that. It was a clear
Yeah.
and fair election.
Yeah.
And I think, honest to goodness, and my 3 adult kids, very bright, very educated, professional people, they've all said, as I mentioned in the beginning, if Trump gets assassinated, there'll be violence. If they believe Trump loses this election because they stole it from him, because it was rigged, there will be violence. Those are my final comments. And all I have to say about this upcoming election and Trump derangement syndrome, whatever you want to call it. I really think it's a very sad place for the United States of America to be. And both of them are tremendous risks to what most of us would like to believe is a democratic, free state, a free entity where we have the freedom of speech.
I always want to go back to Billy Bob's. They're all criminals, okay?
Yeah.
They're all criminals, but Trump is the criminal with the court appearances, and that's because he's not within the status quo. And if you want to call it the deep state, let's go with Peter Dale Scott. Let's call it the deep state, okay? So that's true. That aspect is true. The other aspect, as Ian and I have said a number of times on the show, is Trump is an idiot. He's a fool.
You get no
and he
disagreement
had 4
from me.
years to do what some of the things that Regis is talking about, and he didn't do a goddamn thing because he's lazy. He's fat and he's lazy, and he doesn't want to act in a way that's constructive, and he'll go whichever way the wind blows. I mean, but like I remember the story about John Bolton coming into his office saying, hey Donnie, we got to invade Venezuela, and then and Trump said, why do we have to invade Venezuela? He wants me to comment about Bolton. He would come in every morning and want to blow up the world. Okay, and then Bolton pointed out, well, Venezuela has a lot of oil, and Trump goes, oh yes, we have to invade. We've got to invade. We got to get that oil. He was creaming his jeans. He wet himself over that. And it turned around. He didn't have any facts, any knowledge, couldn't spell Venezuela, yet he's going that way. That's, and you're right, Regis. I mean, Biden doesn't have the brain power. Now, look, we've had a lot of presidents that didn't have the brain power. Truman was an idiot. He had Jimmy Burns behind him, his national security advisor, Jimmy Burns. Let him around. Truman almost literally had a ring in his nose. And Jimmy Burns led him around on foreign policy, ended up in dropping the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, listening to those assholes. And even when Curtis LeMay and people like that were on the fence about it. And so, and we've had George Bush, both of them. I mean, Molly Ivins said about the senior Bush, she was a journalist. If oil ever goes to if brains ever go to $90 a barrel, I want the drilling rights on that man's brain because he.
Okay, that was a good one.
Bush Jr. was an idiot. Bush Jr. was an idiot. Now, one thing you could say about Clinton and Obama, they're sly dogs. They're criminals of a whole different level, whole different ilk. They're fast talking, sweet talking motherfuckers, but they're all involved. They're all involved in this criminality, and they pick and choose who they want to go after. And yes, they picked Trump because they didn't want him to come. And what's interesting about it is they misdiagnosed much of the American public because they're just as stupid, if not more so, than Trump. And so the more they go after Trump, the more his power base is energized.
Well, I don't know if they misdiagnosed the stupidity of the public. I think they misdiagnosed the extent to which the public hates the establishment, especially after the hope and change.
Yeah, but there's a context for that, Billy Bob.
Have
you ever talked to these people? I talk to them all the time.
Okay, so Regis said a whole lot, and I mean, there's hours and hours of topics to discuss with what Regis laid out there.
Yeah,
I think the idea that the Western Empire is in a very crucial period where it's trying to survive and maintain its power and its preeminence, and the last thing they need is a president that is going to go off script, and so I share Regis's concern that maybe lead poisoning is going to be the option that they resort to.
Yes.
Another interesting speculative scenario is the one that
this is all fantasy.
Dan Lazar brought up when he was a guest on our program. They thought maybe they'll bring Trump in and they'll let him manage the decline, and that way Trump can take all the blame for whatever he ends up doing with this collapsing house of cards.
Listen,
what I would add is we're living in a very dangerous time.
That's for sure.
Because of the lack of leadership and diplomacy coming from the United States. The rest of the world knows this. And when I say dangerous, I mean dangerous.
Oh, Europe is just as dangerous at the moment. and just as
Well,
incompetent.
I don't disagree, Ben. But you look at the United States right now on four fronts is either waging or threatening war: Ukraine, Israel, China, North Korea.
Yeah, Korea's getting
We're
hot.
talking about nuclear armed countries. Israel's got the weapon, they've got the bomb. North Korea has it. And when you don't have this strong principled leadership coming from the United States, I don't care who the hell you're talking about. If you're talking about Biden or you're talking about Trump or you're talking about Blinken or Kirby or any of these people, they are not even Class C actors in this global platform. And and this is why I think what's happening in the United States, and when people from other countries, Ben, I'd like to know what you think. They see this as a very dangerous time because will those people who control it, they're the moneyed people, they're the Bank of London, they're the Rothschilds, whoever you want to name them, realizing they've lost this battle for control of the future order of the world, will they take us all down with them in a nuclear
That's
Armageddon?
That's the golden question. I wish I had access to the halls of power in Europe. But what I can tell you is I've had enough of Trump, but he won 6 out of the 7 swing states in a poll recently. So pretty much everybody accepted he's coming. And that includes Ukraine. I read on the Kiev Post that, Yermak, one of these giants next to Tiny Zelensky, his main head of staff, as well as Zelensky's, like they're messaging to Trump, like, you should be a Reagan Republican. He fought the Soviet Union. This is the same thing, trying to get him on their side. Like they feel, yeah, Biden's out. We're done. In Europe, we had the 75 years of NATO, this beautiful thing. By the way, we have to say, hello and farewell, Paulie. Catch you later, because you were here before we started broadcasting. One of the OGs. So thank you. Anyway, this 75 year, like there was a slew of maybe 8 articles about de-Trumping or Trump-proofing. You could just put in the phrase like this contact group, Ukraine contact group, that is also the Ramstein format. We're going to get that away from the US, put it firmly into NATO. We're going to do the same with this new magnificent 50 billion or 100 billion, I'm not even 100 billion trust fund that we're going to keep Ukraine funded for 5 years. Everybody's terrified that this guy is coming. And the other thing that terrifies them is that Ukraine is done, son. It's over. I mean, this big Politico article, maybe 2 or 3 days ago, it was from unnamed Ukrainian officials who once, answered to the previous Minister of Defense, which was Zaluzhny. And they're saying there's no weapon that could save this thing. You send all the weapons in the world, that front is going to crumble.
Not even the Patriots, Ben?
Not even the Patriot. That
no. If you give them 100 Patriots, they're going to be marching off Moscow.
Kuleba's on that page that you have 100 and we just give us at least 7. You're not giving us any. And then Germany has started looking for the Patriots. So that's the latest on that. But yeah, these guys said nothing is going to save the front line. It could crumble anywhere. So there's a big poo-poo moment, including in, the Elysee Palace in France, including Brussels, including Washington, that this is going to be a terrible humiliation. And what that brings out in people, I mean, just this morning I read that the Zaporizhia, if you're Ukrainian, Zaporozhye, if you're Russian, the nuclear power plant is once again under bombardment. Like 2 or 3 days ago, they cut one of the power lines that does the cooling. So Ukraine, at least Kiev, the junta, the regime, is ready to do anything, including a European catastrophe. And it scares me. Macron, we can talk about some diplomatic phone calls, important ones that took place. He seems to be ready to jump. What was that phrase? The one that, it's from computer gaming, doing the... I'm just going to go in and do whatever it's... Leroy Jenkins, the meme. I don't know if anybody knows it. He's just going to go in and do whatever he wants. It's scary as fuck. And one of the main articles that came out that made it into Russian media was from Edvard Lutvak, this Romanian guy who's now American, who Carlo has met personally. Who kind of let it spill that, yeah, the Nordic countries, the Brits and the French, they're already preparing troops to get into Ukraine, and I don't think they know what they're playing with. From the Russian side, the messaging has been consistent. They're going to be dead. Medvedev said we're going to put an extra bounty, as in the extra price on them, and that's it. We're not going to take hostages. It couldn't be more outright and overt, but it seems, I don't know what desperation brings out of these people, but at this point, it should be either talking to the other side earnestly or admitting defeat. I mean, we're getting very close to this. I wish Ian was here, who's on assignment, unfortunately, because he says this could last years, and more I'm seeing, this can't last, past the summer.
I think something very significant. Putin has said recently, Lavrov has indicated it, Peskov, the spokesman for the Kremlin, this is no longer the special military operation.
It's the CTO now, yeah.
In other words, this is war. And I want to point out something else. Russia already has, I don't know, many hundreds of thousands of troops ready to enter the fight. But it was just reported since January 1st, 100,000 Russians have signed up to join the contract army. And within a couple of days after the Crocus City Hall massacre, 6,000 Russians, 16,000. I'm sorry, 16,000 signed up to join the army to exact revenge. Now, with all of these people, and with what's currently happening in Ukraine, and with what all of the bluster that Ben's talking about coming from the United States and coming from the EU, I no longer think Russia is going to sit back. The ground is going to harden. And I don't like speculation. I don't have a crystal ball. But I don't think Russia has any choice but to end all of this aggression against Russia and Russian people. Those are my thoughts.
He has an 87% mandate. And before we get everybody's responses, I'd like you to see a clip I found from the other side. And this is, everybody knows, thank you, USA, Mr. Radoslav Sikorski, Anne Applebaum's Paul Toy, the foreign minister of Poland. And to Voice of America trustee propagandist. This is also, by the way, as you can see, by the Atlantic Council. So very good people who shared this video clip. When the question was, I cued it to that point, what does NATO do at this moment? Listen to this.
Right over there.
NATO is doing a great deal. We have AWACS in the air, so we have the awareness of the situation. We now have 10,000 US troops in Poland alone, and other troops in the Baltic states. We are currently carrying out the largest military exercise in decades. And we're also proving
this is the important part.
How misleading Putin is when he says that he had to invade because of NATO expansion. As far as I know, in the Kaliningrad Oblast of the Russian Federation that sits between Poland and Lithuania, also along the Finnish borders, there are now hardly any Russian troops left. They've all been sent to Ukraine. Now, would you do that if you believe that NATO may attack you? Surely this is best proof that he believes that NATO is a defensive alliance, that we would not even think of taking advantage of his military weakness, because we weren't.
Well, I have some other clips from Mr. Jens Stoltenberg, but I wonder if anybody wanted to comment at this point.
He's delusional.
Yeah, he's dangerously lying.
I've been saying this for many years. What would the United States do? And remember back to 1962, October, the Cuban Missile Crisis. What would the United States do if China or Russia or together surrounded North America with 50, 60 bases?
Oh, at least.
If they flooded the Pacific and the Atlantic and the Caribbean with their fleets, what would the United States do? Boom, it would be all over. You'd have ballistic war immediately. And for the United States and NATO to say we're defensive when you surround Russia, completely surround Russia, and Ben, you mentioned it, Operation Steadfast Defender is going on right now. It'll continue into May. The largest military exercise along Russia's border ever. 90,000 troops, thousands of tanks and armored vehicles, airplanes, ships, you name it. And you're going to tell me that this is defensive? If you could put yourself in the shoes of anybody in Russia, any ordinary person in Russia, and they understand what the hell is going on. This is war, and they know it now. The Russians now know it, that their future existence is what's at stake. I'm telling you, from here, this is how people feel.
To add to that, Stoltenberg already kind of admitted that this was all about NATO expansion, getting that document from Putin in 2019 saying, here's what you should absolutely declare, and then there will be no war. And a couple of the headlines are about steady expansion, including this one from MSN. NATO eyes expansion of missions in the Middle East and North Africa. Just so you know, that's the peaceful defense.
And Asia, they want to expand to the Asia Pacific with Japan, Australia,
bring in Japan, exactly.
South Korea,
the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Yes, those are famous North Atlantic regions.
North Atlantic, guys.
Yeah. Well, like I said,
Stoltenberg was lying about the
names, just their labels.
Look, NATO has a brand new strategy because they've been training one of their best armies in Ukraine for 10 years, and it got smashed like 2 or 3 times. Everybody knows this. A lot of these people are afraid, especially their people who won't sign up for the military. So we have a brand new strategy from Mr. Norwegian Wood. One of the worst accents. It's worse than German English accent for me, this guy. But take a look at what he says and his agitation.
Is that if you want this war to end,
sorry, max volume.
Convince Moscow that they will not win on the battlefield. They cannot wait us out. The sooner we can then be able to reach a peace agreement where Russia realizes that they cannot win the war, but have to sit down and negotiate an agreement where Ukraine prevails as a sovereign independent nation. So a stronger NATO role in coordinating and providing support is a way to end this war in a way where Ukraine prevails. We already have a lot of coordination.
Well,
yeah, just
convince
Russia that they're going to lose. Just get them to surrender, and then we'll be good. That's all we got to do.
Or convince Russia they lost. That's the new NATO strategy. Interesting to say. One more, and then I swear we're done with the clips. But this guy had another one, and this is, I think, better volume and better quality, where he actually lined out 2. And that's interesting because he never had this kind of a negative attitude before. So this one, last one.
Fundamentally, there are 2 possible scenarios. One is that NATO allies are able to mobilize more support and that Ukraine is able to regain more territory. And the other scenario is that we are not able to do so. And then there is a real risk that Russia will capture even more territory and that we will be in an even more dangerous position. And the thing is that the only way to reach a just and lasting peace in Ukraine is to have a strong Ukrainian armed forces, because that's the only way to convince President Putin that he will not win on the battlefield. And that's the only way to then convince him that he has to sit down and negotiate some kind of exchange.
The end is exactly the same, but still, at least he had the B version of, well, what if we fail? I think he's worried about his retirement somewhere in Norway, and Norway is one of the majorly belligerent countries now, and what will happen to them. But
yeah, looked to me like somebody who's really desperate. He didn't look like a very calm politician. He looked like somebody who's scared to death.
Doesn't he? He constantly looks like he needs to pee, or he had on the edge of a nervous breakdown. But yeah, he's almost out of a job. Apparently, they're talking about a new Secretary General that they just can't make up their mind who that would be. Pretty well.
Carlo, any thoughts? I was gonna, I know you had a lot of thoughts.
They're gone now.
Okay, I understand.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. They weren't that important. Go ahead.
One interesting thing is just to try and put yourselves in, that guy's shoes, or in the shoes of, presiding over this imperial collapse. Like, it's not an easy job. Running this empire is not an easy job, and you're faced with some very difficult situations due to your own, choices you've made leading up to now. And so, they shouldn't have ever overthrown the government in Ukraine. They shouldn't have never provoked Russia with their Nazis and with their repression of Russian people inside of Ukraine. And now they've painted themselves in this corner where they have to do something. They have to either escalate in a way there's no good options. Like, escalation is there. If there was a winning escalation option, they would have done it a long time ago. But there's really no good option. So they can just accept defeat, or they can escalate and throw their Hail Mary pass. And that's what I see Stoltenberg on the stage reminding people. It's like, we got to do something, guys. We got to do something, or we're going to lose. But he's not offering a fucking solution. He's not offering a play that makes any sense. As a strategist, it's pathetic. Like, if he was the coach of a football team, his Hail Mary play is non-existent. So
it's borrow a lot of money, and maybe 5 years from now we can buy a player. That's his strategy. It is.
It's worthless. Yeah, it's worthless. So I empathize with the people who are having to preside over this collapsing empire. And it's just it's kind of enjoyable for me to watch it all collapse. But it's gonna really get fun, as time goes on. The hope is that we're not going to be entertained by a whole bunch more genocides and impoverishment and economic collapse. It's really going to cause a lot of pain and hardship on people. So but if that's what happens, like, we know who's responsible for that. So what about this? What about the Olympics in Paris, where there's the big false flag where Russia is blamed, and that's going to be the way to force everybody to start ponying up some more blood? What do you think about that? Likely or not likely? Because
I don't give a rat's rectum about the Olympics.
Macron already said Russia is going to attack.
Okay, let me give you a bit of a boot here, right? First, there was Mr. Biden called Xi Jinping, right? And they were the readout battle between them. And then the Chinese, he said, I'm going to talk to them about supporting Russia over Ukraine is bad. And the Chinese readout was, well, we don't give a shit because we had that summit and everything was supposed to be positive, and everything you've done since then was negative against our economy. And by the way, our biggest red line is Taiwan. So chill the fuck down. We're not going to do anything, help you out in the Red Sea or help you out with Russia. Bye. Next day, this Lecornu guy, the defense minister of France, I think under US pressure, called Mr. Shoigu. And apparently, again, there was a readout battle saying, well, of course, we condemn the Crocus attack in Russia, but, we should maybe do like a Turkish solution, the like what we had 2 years ago, the Turkish negotiations, or maybe go back to some sort of a Minsk. And Mr. Shoigu sent him to hell, saying, fuck off, we're not going, the reality has changed. Sorry, I'm sort of translating it into Ben. And then he said, well, as far as the Crocus thing goes, we are absolutely going to investigate. And I really hope there were no French special forces involved. Right. That's what he said. Very, very diplomatic, very nice. But basically, it sent what in part of that article where he said Russia might be attacking the Paris Olympics is this phone call. It was undemocratic. It was menacing. It was menacing was the word, and another one that I can't think of, not platonic, but something like that. He was unnerved, Mr. Macron. I mean, he couldn't call Putin. That ship has flown. Biden can't call Putin. He's written himself off that book. So they got this poor guy to call Shoigu, and Shoigu showed him the fucking door, and that sent Macron into a frenzy. That's the analysis of Elder Alexander Mercuris from the Duran.
So menacing was actually a word that Macron used to describe Shoigu in that phone call. That's interesting.
While you guys discuss this, I'm going to find the actual quote. Yes.
Okay.
if you have thoughts on it. But that's, I think, the vital background to why it led to this point.
You know, when I hear this, that Macron is saying Russia is going to do something to disrupt the Olympics, I have a hard time even wanting to listen to that and even wanting to respond to that. Russia has shown it has no interest in doing anything of that kind. I will tell you this. If Russia and Iran on Israel, if they do anything, it's going to be asymmetric type of warfare. It will not be something to bring about a huge escalation in a direct conflict. It'll be something
right there, Brian.
asymmetric that will allow plausible deniability. That's how they're playing this freaking game now. Plausible deniability.
And that's what freaked him out. Here's the direct quote. The comments by the Russian side were bizarre and threatening, Mr. Macron told reporters, adding that suggestions that France might have been involved in the deadly attack were ridiculous. I'd like to expand on that just a little bit, because what I found was something I think unique when it comes to Crocus. Okay, so there was this, what was it, CNN Times, a Times UK article that interviewed a lot of Ukraine intelligence people. I don't know if it was the GUR or the main intelligence, whatever one. And here's the title: Ukraine stokes anti-immigrant tensions in Russia. Agents conducting psyops after Crocus to divide society. And I thought, well, Alex Christoforou, the younger one, had the same thought because he's in a country that experienced this. That doesn't sound very much like the GUR, you know, who killed Daria Dugina, who killed Tatarsky, thank you very much. It's just someone did some, and maybe wanted to kill Shaman. Someone did some naughty things, we're going to kill him, and there's fear. But this division sounds like Britain. And he's right about this, because Yugoslavia was very much the same. You know, it sounds like the UK. So if the French were not involved, it still unraveled them, because everybody knows that if this is traced back to Ukrainian intelligence, the West is elbow deep in that shit. I mean, the CIA did that big article, very proud that they built this shit. You know how involved they are. So that's what's got.
I know Regis mentioned he doesn't even want to entertain this thought, but let's just speculate, because I don't see it way outside the realm of possibility. You know, some faction of the Western establishment gets their ISIS proxy to do some kind of an attack during the Olympics, right? And then the media just takes over and does their soft propaganda thing, saying, I don't know who it is, I don't know who did it, but look at all the reasons Russia would have had to do it. Russia wasn't invited to the Olympics. Russians can't compete in the Olympics. Russia was just attacked with a terror attack. I mean, I'm not saying Russia did it, but Russia had every reason to do it. So that's the kind of thing. So, I mean, I think that's totally, and the whole time it was a self-inflicted false flag terror attack by our ISIS proxies. Like, that is totally within the realm of possibility. But
yeah, I don't disagree. What I said is totally ludicrous to blame Russia.
No, of course.
And so an international worldwide gathering like the Olympics, given the period, the time we're living in, it is not beyond the realm of possibility that something really dramatic could happen during the Paris Olympics.
I think that's...
They can steal the 30,000 condoms that they're sending to the Olympics, and then the STDs would be rampant. Those diabolical Russians. Yeah. I'll tell you what I think happened with the Crocus Theater.
What?
I think that the Central Intelligence Agency and MI6 is behind it all, and with help from the Ukrainians. And I don't think these. I think that it's very convincing what Scott Ritter and Larry Johnson and
Nikolai Patrushev and
and a host of people have said about these so-called ISIS members. They're not ISIS members. Obviously, they didn't act like ISIS members. They didn't martyr themselves. They ran like a bunch of little bitches to the fucking Ukrainian border
to get their money. Exactly.
To get their money, which is another factor that doesn't that
No
proves
Western
that they're
article
not
mentions.
ISIS.
No Western article mentions that they ran to Ukraine. It's like off the radar of media. It's amazing.
Exactly, because it points right to the traditional Central Intelligence Agency with the host country, Ukraine, using proxies to commit an atrocity. I mean, how many dozens of times, hundreds of times, does the CIA have to do this before people talk about it? We talked about Indonesia in 65, 66. You know, I met the woman that broke the story of Richard Helms and John Martin's admitting to it, Kathy Cadane. You know, and the CIA was purely behind it. Martin's admitted that he handed over names of people to be killed by the Suharto regime.
And it makes perfect sense from the US perspective. I mean,
Yeah,
look at it from the grand global perspective. This whole thing was sanctions war, regime change, Moscow Maidan, Putin is gone, and we have all that country to slice it up ourselves, all the natural resources, all that. Didn't happen. Putin's more supported than ever. He's more popular than ever. And in the meantime, they just lost to, they still call them the Houthis, but the Yemeni armed forces. They basically capitulated. The big US aircraft carrier fleet said, well, we find that there's no military solution. We're looking for a diplomatic off-ramp, meaning those guys won. That just fell the fuck apart. Israel, their main project in the oil-rich Middle East, is completely isolated in the world, undergoing an even not worse, but on par with Ukraine, an economic collapse. Taiwan had a big earthquake. All the headlines were about, oh shit, the most advanced chips in the world, right?
Yeah.
All of these things around are happening. There's nobody believes that they're the knight in shining armor who's going to save them. Europe no longer believes it. The Middle Eastern little ally no longer believes it. Ukraine, I think, is on the precipice of just a mental breakdown. And why didn't those B-2 bombers come and save us? And at this moment, just look at what options you have. Well, let's try to do ethnic hatred among Russians, which is a lost cause ever since, I think, the Chechen conflict, an absolute lost cause. The unity of Russian society ever since Crocus has been amazing to me. I have to say that, Regis. Absolutely amazing.
I can vouch for that. Right down to, I mean, kids in high school. This country is so united today. People are overlooking some of the domestic problems, but they are so united. They understand the existential threat to their existence. And when the United States officially says our foreign policy is the strategic defeat of Russia.
Yeah. And they say
every Russian knows that. They've heard that. And they can see that this is what's going on.
Yeah. And you mentioned they overlook some domestic problems. Every country has domestic problems. But Russia, this is the new Rostad data. Just by GDP alone, they grew 7.7% in February and more in March. These are China numbers, ladies and gentlemen. This hasn't happened in 20, 30 years. It's record breaking. In the meantime, Ukraine struck some oil fields. And now apparently there was an oil refinery also on the island of Taiwan called the Formosa refinery, very colonial name anyway. And the price of Brent crude went to $90, and suddenly Biden stopped refilling the strategic oil reserve that he drained. So even the energy wars are not going in the direction that is preferable to, high gas prices at the tap is not an election win. And that's like every star is aligned right now against the hegemon. I couldn't be happier if it didn't cost so many lives.
So you mentioned Yemen, which is very important. Essentially, I mean, the Yemenis have been attacking Western, economic, tankers and cargo ships, also military, right? So the Yemens have been launching, missiles at
60 or 70 ships, those glorious
at
bastards,
Western military assets. And what does the West do? Says, hey, if you stop, we'll take you off the state-sponsored terrorism list. Okay. But Yemen is principled. Yemen is doing that because of the genocide. You want Yemen to stop, you get the genocide to stop. Speaking of the genocide, Israel's in fucking trouble now because they killed fucking white people. What the fuck?
Have you heard? People are dead. Have you heard that the Russian Navy sailed into the Red Sea?
Just like a homecoming queen, like a champion. I think the Houthis were probably
doing joint operations with China, I believe.
China was just docked there in Djibouti. They don't give a shit.
apropos of what Ben was saying, Iran also struck a large field of oil just recently.
Oh, they just found like
Heard about
2.5
that.
billion
Shale,
barrels.
But
shale
let's
oil,
stick
right?
to Billy Bob's point. I'd like to also make a Nostradamus type prediction, which will
Go.
of course turn out to be true. The Biden administration and the U.S. intelligence knew all about the killing of those 7 aid workers. They knew about it in advance. They acquiesced to it. They knew they're totally in line with Netanyahu. And this good cop, bad cop, this good cop Biden, bad cop Netanyahu is all bullshit. It's bullshit.
Did you find the archive title I put in the cheat sheet just before everything in the Middle East? It's from the Politico US from November 2023. The title is "The US has sent Israel data on the aid group locations to try to prevent strikes." Interesting that they had those locations. Now they're blaming it on AI. They're blaming it on 2 people who they fired, 2 military leaders or something. But yeah, 6 white people died, right? 3 Brits, a Pole, an Australian, and a dual Canadian American. And now Europe and US are ready to outrage.
In an unprecedented statement, the state of Israel says that attack was a grave mistake.
Yeah, and at the same time, El País, the Spanish, I think it's the country magazine, just thought it timely to bring out an article saying about over 200 aid workers have been killed during the course of this conflict.
Yeah.
But it's this 6. The 7th was a Palestinian. That's why I say 6.
And not to mention the journalists who have been killed. And, it was a grave mistake that we struck the Iranian embassy.
Here's what I'm going to say about that. Russia, China, and Iran, they are the masters of cold-blooded restraint. And I'm going to make an Nostradamus. If I'm wrong, well, too bad. I don't think they're going to respond in any kind of aggressive way. These guys plan coldly. I read a huge article, I think it was in the Cradle, about how Iran boils a frog. As you know, that's the thing where it doesn't notice that the temperature goes up, and once it's boiling, it's dead. And they're just not going to do these provocative embassy attacks or some strategic reserve or something like that. What they're going to do is scare them to hell. I mean, they're scared. They did GPS jamming all around the Middle East. It was present. The US was scared. It like doubled the embassy security and all that, but they didn't do a goddamn thing. Even though it's Al-Quds Day, it's the main day of this resistance fighting unit in Iran, and there's billions on the street. So they are the masters of not falling for the provocation that the West sends at them. Even though it's a great loss. 2 very important generals died there.
Yeah. I mean, it was such an obvious provocation. I mean, they're not foolish enough to just fall right into that trap and give Israel, bail Israel out by doing something that's going to allow the U.S. to further escalate. But
you can bet they were right.
To see if anything happens. So you're predicting no overt, obvious response in the news cycle in the next few days.
No, I don't. I think maybe weeks from now, some very important. Let's say Ben-Gvir maybe has an accident around the bed table or something. But I don't think it's going to be like big nuclear strike. And believe me, they were angry because at the UN, the US and the UK refused to even discuss Israel's strike on Syria, the Damascus embassy. They just vetoed the whole thing. How ridiculous is that? The 6 people died. Very, very important. This is a strike on 2 sovereign nations. No, we won't discuss it.
They vetoed the discussion. Bringing it up. Wow.
And the Central Kitchen, or whatever it's called,
World Central Kitchen,
Andres, he's played along with U.S. foreign policy for the entire thing. He was basically, he went to the State Department and said, "Look, I can do what UNRWA is doing." And let's get UNRWA out, and I'll do that. And then they go and they take out the State Department, and U.S. intelligence takes out his own people. He's got to feel like a fool, because he is a fool.
Credit where
game.
Credit where credit is due. This was done by the Washington Post, and I didn't expect them to do that, but they did a map of this is how the attack unfolded, and they said these are 3. That's 0.2 miles. So they're miles apart, 3 precision hunting attacks. to their credit, they did this. So this wasn't some collateral damage, accident or anything like that. And that credit where credit is due. Most of that stuff is shit, but
so Israel's strategy is to, I mean, they're in a effort to, ethnically cleanse Gaza, move all the the Gazans out, and then to put up some beachfront properties for Jewish-only settlers.
And for that.
But the West doesn't want that, right? So you've got this, I mean, allegedly, ostensibly, they say, hey, don't do that. And so all the while it's being done, they're protesting, but at the same time, they're continuing to enable it. So out of one side of their mouth, they're saying, don't do that. Out of the other side, they're handing them every means by which they can do it. And without that means, they couldn't do it. So I like your description of good cop, bad cop. That's exactly what it is. And I don't buy it either.
They're okay with it. They don't want the negative PR.
It's just a PR thing. So they want to deflect the PR, enable the behavior, and I mean,
and now nobody wants to venture in and feed the Palestinians in Gaza. No,
that was the effect.
All the aid workers are begging off.
The aid ships turned around to Cyprus.
So there's words that the Eretz crossing has been opened by Israel. Again, that's positive PR. What that actually looks like on the ground, I don't know.
You know where that is? That's the northern exit into Israel, right? Not the southern one into Egypt. The Erez is the northern one, which means they controlled it all along, which means they closed it for months and months on end. I mean, if that's not an admission of guilt, I don't know what is. But we opened it. Look, we're giving some food.
Yeah. There's not going to be any
so
change.
Disgusting.
The only time I see change is as the U.S. elections approach, and it's very obvious that Trump is going to win, that Biden will suddenly see the light and pretend to cut off arms sales, and then they'll go surreptitiously to Israel through the same pipeline that the Contras receive their arms and smuggle drugs into Miami, by the way, and into Florida. And into California, but that's not the point. But they'll do that. Biden will cut it off. They'll look good to the American electorate. Oh, Biden has finally done something serious about this problem in Palestine, and then that'll boost his electoral potential. If he wins after that, he'll go right back to the same old shit.
Yeah, I think it's gone. I think it's gone too far for that, even with the American public. I think people have basically had it. Thousands of people are pouring out into the streets in demonstrations. My friends back in the state of Maine, they had over 1,000 people in Portland, Maine last weekend. I covered many demonstrations that never came close to 100, but this was 1,000 people. And I think it's happening all across the country. People
and Europe.
Well, in Europe, but we're talking about the American election here right now.
Sorry, and it's all around the world. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I agree. Anyway, I think it's gone too far for Biden to be able to recover from this.
You got to understand the American public. Those same people in those crowds are for Zelensky and Ukraine beating the Russians. Those same people. They're not, they're ninnies. They're not educated. They're not informed. They're just going. They're just playing. They're going for the heart. If you ask them, if we went there with a microphone and a camera, I want to show you my camera, Ben. I found it that I used to use. But
bring it to the show next time.
Yeah, I'm trying to. It's upstairs. It's right next to my desk, and I keep forgetting. But anyway, those people. If we ask those people, 90% of them, 95% of them would be for Ukraine defeating Russia, and they would say that Ukraine is defeating Russia. So that's not a valid crowd out there.
Okay,
that's a very naive and movable, malleable group of folks. So.
You have a more negative.
You can't deny the fact that they have been bringing attention to what's going on in Israel and Palestine. That's undeniable. I don't care what other What are
It's
the causes that?
It's unprecedented in my lifetime. The
doesn't-
amount of pro-Palestinian coverage and rhetoric that's just floating around in the echo chamber. Like I've never seen that much. And so it's a lot of it's bottom up, but some of it is top down. You know, there's some legitimate unhappiness with Netanyahu and with the whole Israel pushing for greater Israel and not just being a nice colony like they're supposed to be.
And especially from the region, the last diplomatic ally, unfortunately, there's financial allies like Turkey who do the rhetoric but still trade. The last diplomatic ally was the UAE, and they just cut it. No diplomatic contact
They
with
just
Israel.
cut ties with Israel.
Yeah, man, that's
Yeah.
big because there's
I mean, you know,
no one
again,
left.
is it lip service? Is it PR? Or is there something behind it? I don't trust those Gulf monarchies, but I would like to believe that, you know, they're engaging in some sovereignty.
Let me bring another thought, something positive, because Carlo's always consistently more negative about the American people than I am. But let's talk about a little bit about the European people. There was this big poll that 45% of Europeans support bringing Ukraine into the EU, which would collapse it financially, like almost instantly. And it was broken down by country. Now, the bottom two were obviously Hungary and Slovakia, but the third one was Czechia, one of the most hawkish, you know, Petr Pavel, the old commie guy who's completely anti-Russia, go Ukraine, Slava Ukraini guy. His population is like 76% against this. And there's two efforts following both Russia and Hungary who have these anti-foreign agent laws, you know, NGO funding and all of that. And now Georgia has begun one of them, and it prompted whoever the State Department guy was to bring a wrong rant about this is dangerous and it brings your European future into question or something like that. That's the de-Americanization, basically. And also another place, which was, Georgia and Kyrgyzstan. Of course, that's the Central Asian region. But, you know, this started in Hungary. We introduced this sovereignty bureau that they're following. And, you know, despite the outrage, that's the future. And I hope it spreads like wildfire. And when it comes to this stupid copium in Ukraine, let me read you just one headline from the Kiev Post. I like to dip into them because it's just fantastic. And what it says was... why some far-right Republicans are hell-bent on ending further aid to Ukraine. Now, this comes from Banderaland, and they're calling some Republicans far-right, which I thought was just poetic, beautiful. It should be framed, you know. Ukraine is mother, Bandera is father, but they're calling Republicans. And one final thing, a short clip. This is, you remember the Surovikin line, the big defense line that Russia built 7 or 8 months, right? Big cones and dragon's teeth. This is the Zelensky line. If you zoom in, much smaller, about half the size of the dragon's teeth that Russia used, right? And in the end, you're going to see the actual extent of this when the drone zooms out to a standard zoom. And this thing, you know, there's about 1,000 kilometers of front between Ukraine and Russia, and that's what they built. Meaning Chasov Yar, the last fortress in the Donbass, where Ukraine is currently, when that falls, this is stopping. Remember when the Germans joked, give us mine clearing vehicles, and they said, well, you just go around the mines. Well, the Russians can just go around that. Very, very easy. You know, so this, again, I wish Ian was here. This thing is going to collapse exponentially so fast. And there goes their bubble, by the way, those Ukraine supporters that you mentioned, Carlo. It just pops.
Yeah. What about those piers in the Gaza? The one that Andre's people were building, and the one that I guess the Army Corps of Engineers for the U.S. is going to build. I haven't seen any evidence that's. I saw the ships in the Mediterranean, but I haven't seen any evidence they've started building it yet.
No, I haven't seen any either. I've read news they will take 60 days or something, but I haven't seen anything. Yeah. Nor do I know what it.
I go with the people that say that both are being built to truck Palestinians out of the country and to Europe.
I mean, that's what they would like to do. I don't see how they could possibly get away with it, but that's definitely what they're trying to do. There was an interesting news item. An ex Sports Center what are they called? Panelist, somebody that did interviews and things like that on Sports Center, recently discussed a 2021 interview she had with Joe Biden. She said that she was told that if you want to speak with Joe Biden, you have to read these questions exactly as we have written them. You cannot deviate from this script at all, or you will be, you will not have a job, essentially. And she ended up leaving Sports Center, but she did do the interview. And she said that she just felt bad for poor Joe Biden because he, off camera, he was mumbling about, he used to play football and he was good. And then his voice kind of just trailed off in 2021. And she felt bad for him. So I don't know. This is kind of evidence of what we have been saying, that, it just seems incomprehensible that Biden is going to be there in, to take over the reins in January of 2025. You guys agree with that? I mean,
well, that's what you have
Regis
stats
suggested
for.
Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom is going to be maybe a last-second fill-in. I know John Stepling was saying
Michelle Obama is an option. Yeah. Look, we got the cheat sheet, which is 12 pages. Biden has these scorecards or whatever with big letters, and he still mumbles. There's viral TikTok videos now talking about Bidenese, the language, and they actually spell out the gibberish he does it with letters and learn this word with us. It's so funny. So he's a zombie. He's a sock puppet. Yeah.
I was on record saying 2020 that he would last about 2 months before they make, Kamala Harris the VP. He'd have to step down due to, a stroke or whatever. And I was wrong. So I did not have any trust that he could do the last 4 years. So maybe I'm equally mistaken. Maybe he's got another 12 years in him. But
no way.
These clips, it just seems like this time we have to be right. There's no way he can be sworn into office on January. They've got to come up with some other plan, you would think. Of course, I thought the same thing 4 years ago.
Well, okay. Look. That's what they have staffs for. Regis, I can remember Ronald Reagan. I'm not saying you're old, Regis, but and Ronald Reagan would be up at the podium, and he would go off script, and he'd say stupid things. And you could see his handler, Don Regan, behind him, kind of going like, oh, God, he dropped another load in his diaper, and now he's going off script, holding his nose like this. Oh, God, it stinks. And it's been classic. I mean, the presidency means nothing. I mean, look at the list of the presidents. How many of them were total fools and idiots? I mean, Herbert Hoover was one of the brighter ones, and he presided over one of the greatest economic collapses the U.S. has ever faced. The only one that's maybe bigger is 2008. And who was president in 2008? Bush.
I thought he was going to be the stupidest ever. By the way, Kiev is talking about Ronald Reagan. I still kind of get over the fact to some conservatives he was the best president ever, who was a cowboy, a Western actor, right?
Yeah. He was a racist. That was his. They loved that.
But yeah, I mean, you already had the Zelensky, sort of.
Yeah.
Actors make the best puppet figureheads,
Yeah.
Yes.
Could he play the piano with his dong?
We'll have to ask Nancy.
Yeah, true.
I don't think his dong was long enough. This is really degraded here.
Yeah.
Sorry,
really,
I took that.
That's all right. I like degraded.
Don't worry, it'll get yanked anyway, because Regis said the 2016 elections were clear and fair.
We rebuke that opinion, YouTube censors. We have the best democracy in the world, the best democracy that has ever existed, that will ever exist, that
money can buy.
Yeah,
right. We believe in the Constitution here. Right? So,
Regis, thank you so much for joining us and spending your precious time. Regis has his own podcast. He is always interviewing tremendous guests and putting out great content. Check out Regis' YouTube account. You also are on Rumble, Regis?
Rumble, BitChute, And YouTube as Alfredo Balduc, Bolduc.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. I need to get on Rumble. I haven't figured out how to stream on Rumble. I know I either
That's
have to
very
pay.
easy. It's very easy.
I gotta
Are
figure
you
that out.
using StreamYard? You're using
Yes.
StreamYard
Yes.
now. You can stream directly to Rumble from StreamYard, but you have to go into Rumble and select, I want to do a live stream. You set it up with the same time and the title, and you put submit, and then you'll get a request in StreamYard to select that particular show. It'll be the only one that shows up. It's really,
Okay.
go to YouTube and type the query in and you'll get an answer. It's easy.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I don't have any kind of a presence on Rumble, but yeah, the way YouTube censors. Sorry.
You want to get there.
Yeah. Okay. All right, guys. Any other final thoughts? We're gonna meet up again on Tuesday.
I just thanks to all the regulars, Brian Holden, Yasha, Christy, as well as
Yes,
James.
yes.
I think Paul is
Yes.
no longer with us, so thank you. Drop a like, a subscribe if you like what you hear. And just a final thought on Hungary, because we had the Liberation Day, which was April the 4th originally, when the Soviets liberated us from the fucking Nazis, no longer celebrated, obviously. But today we have a brand new deal with a Russian discount supermarket called Mir or something, and
Right.
that's going to undermine these German bastards in Lidl and Aldi and all of these shit. So thank goodness we're at least making some steps east. I'm happy. Hope you're happy.
We shop at Aldi, so here in
It's
Washington.
global.
I want to say one thing about the representatives from Germany and some of the other more northern countries. You want to learn how to use your hands in an argument. Talk to the Italians. Talk to the Italians.
Take note, Mr. Stoltenberg.
There we go.
Good.
On that great advice, we will see you guys on Tuesday. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take